I will just tell you that I've watched enough Bollywood movies in my life to know that the guy looks at the woman and he's married to her the next day. And that's what I brought into my book. And I think that I was trying to almost give that lesson of love from my point of view as a South Asian woman.
The library was my space, and there was just so much.
To the Harbor Grace excursion with the boys to have a time.
So culture and chemistry, you guys.
We have that.
We got it. What? They should all be on.
I think mine's on. Hello? Hi.
Hi.
So why don't we start really simply, nice and slow, by getting the answer to a question that humankind has asked for millennia now. What makes two people fall in love? Is it chemistry or is it chance? Just the happenstance of two people being at the right time in the right place? Who's going to field that one?
I have a theory about romance writers. And a friend of mine actually told me this, and a romance writer. And her theory is that romance writers are the least romantic people in the world because we have to tell the same stories. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but we're telling the romance from, the books are wonderful and there's a lot of feeling and a lot of emotion and we do put our hearts into it. But there is a bit of a technical part of it where we're reading the same damn book hundreds of times. The magic is gone by about the third time you read it. Do you still feel that when you read after the 11th time? Do you feel that euphoria of falling in love? Not so much. So I don't know if that question, I don't know the answer to that. Like what makes
Because
people
your
fall in
job
love?
is essentially to make it happen over and over again.
And I create it. How do real people fall in love? I have no idea. No clue. I know how to make my people fall in love.
Dude, you are such a bummer. Oh my gosh. All these people came here to hear about love and romance.
I don't believe in love.
And the beauty of love. And you're like, no, sorry. Everyone just get cats.
I do love my cats a lot.
Okay, so cats are amazing. Cats are amazing. I'm going to disagree. I think that people fall in love for so many different reasons. Sometimes it's like I actually do kind of believe in insta-love. I wish I didn't. But sometimes I think, two people just kind of see each other and they're like, that's my person. Like that is the person for me. And sometimes it takes a long time, like years. But eventually they become your person and you become their person. But I will say, the thing is, when you're writing romances, you have to do all those permutations of, that's my instant person, and that was my best friend in grade school who now I've just seen, and oh my gosh, they are so hot. And that's my best friend's brother, and that's whatever. And for me, there's just so many ways people fall in love. It's actually hard to narrow it down. So you kind of have your favorites, but people fall in love, and so as many ways as there are people, there are ways to fall in love. I think.
I like that. That's really
Her
nice.
answer was better than mine.
I feel somehow someone else must have said that, and I'm just plagiarizing it. So if you do find that quote somewhere, I'm really sorry to that original person.
Okay, I want to get all of your answers on this one because I feel like as a romance writer that you are constantly in tune to observing chemistry, almost like a National Geographic, photographer in the wild. Like, are you able to sort of walk outside and not observe like a couple on a bench, or are you getting it from, television movies?
Yes, I would say that I'm the worst person at a restaurant because I watch everybody. Yeah. And I just think, oh, they're not talking at dinner. They must have the worst relationship. That's where my head goes.
And are you stealing ideas? Like,
I'm not stealing ideas because there is no idea when no one's talking, but I would say that, and I would be the most difficult partner. I am the most difficult partner because I have these outrageous ideas of what love should be and chemistry should be, that I bring that to the relationship then. And so it becomes an ongoing, like 24/7 dramatic book of dating me. Do you know what I mean? So I think that, yeah, the drama just has to be there all the time. The chemistry just has to be there all the time. Yeah.
Jackie, what about you? Are you constantly observing?
Is this working? Okay. No, not really, but also there hasn't been much opportunity in the past 2 years. So the past 2 years have been a lot more of me watching movies and reading books and sort of, seeing how I relate to that than my own personal experience, because it's just me alone in my apartment.
So is it safe to say that maybe your observations are more internal?
Yeah, I think so. At least recently, yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Unless you found creative ways, like lurking through a window at your neighbors, which I also did too. Or when the Amazon delivery guy came and just dropped things off, and you just started looking at him like, oh, he's getting cuter by the day. These are the kinds of mind tricks your brain plays as an author. I think you try to find love or drama or something in everybody that you see.
But seeing it is one thing wherever you see it, whether it comes from inside or you're lurking people in restaurants. But then translating that into the written word is a whole nother ball game. And I'm going to assume that maybe a first draft, you don't always nail the chemistry right away. This is an assumption. And if that assumption is correct, is there a common mistake that you make or a quick fix?
I think for me, I do nail the chemistry. I nail the love arc in the story at the beginning, because that's the only thing I know when I'm going in. I know who is going to fall in love with who. Everything else is who knows what's going to happen. Who knows who's going to get into a conflict? Who knows what the conflict's going to be? Because I'm very much writing off the seat of my pants. But I know who's going to fall in love with who. So if anything, it's the opposite. I often go too far with the lusty looks, the looking across the room, the catching eyes, the drooling over somebody's forearms. I say forearms because my most recent book, Camila Knows Best, I went with the forearm porn a little bit too far in the first few drafts. I had to pull back a bit because I'm like, it's a bit much. So I think that's the thing that I do get right. And going too far and then dialing it back to where it should be is actually a great way to make sure you have enough chemistry in there. Because I think that's the one thing that, as a reader, that bothers me the most is when there isn't enough chemistry between. I say as a reader, but I think books do tend to do it well. But I complain a lot when I'm watching movies, when I'm watching romantic movies, that there isn't enough chemistry. And I feel like if they had just put all of it in there at first and then dialed back, there would have been enough to start with.
Oh, that was a good answer. Anyone else?
Yeah, I agree. For a romance, the entire book is built around that central relationship. So if you don't start with two characters have a spark for each other, you really don't have anything to even work from, because the rest of the book just doesn't make sense. And there's no fun in writing it because it's just like you're jamming two people together and just like, well, we're going to the store. That's boring. Like there's no fun.
Right.
But sometimes you're writing it and you can tell it's not quite there. Like, like Farah was saying, she goes overboard. The one I just finished writing, I was like, my main character, like, I like you a lot, but I'm not totally in love with you yet. And if you're not, for me, I have to be really in love with that main character. For both, like, the female character, I write like male, female, so it's the male and female character. And Teddy, I liked him. He was a pretty good guy. Like, he was cool. He was super hot. Like, he had a lot going for him. But I wasn't totally in love with him. And then I just put a pair of glasses on him. And I'm like, that's it.
Oh my God.
Like, I was like, okay, Teddy, you're humming. Like, so sometimes it's just a very small tweak. And I don't know what, actually, I do know why. I saw a picture of a guy with glasses. But, and then I was like, there's Teddy. But, from then on, somehow I was able to bring that together. But I couldn't, I got to that point where I couldn't really write anymore because they weren't gelling in the way they had to gel, because that is the whole point of a romance.
But often these characters start off with either a misunderstanding each other, or sometimes they actually despise each other. So how do you make sure that we're still rooting for them? Or do you not want us to root for them at the beginning? But I kind of feel like that's key. That's a tricky thing, right? How do you tackle that, Jackie?
So I generally don't like writing characters who absolutely despise each other at the beginning. I don't really, the whole like enemies to lovers thing is not really my favorite trope. But like definitely you have to give them some redeeming qualities at the beginning. Even if you don't see them when they're together, you have to see them when they're separate.
It is such a common trope, though. Reading your books, it was common among some of them. And then I was like, oh my gosh, this reminds me of sort of some of my favorite like 30s and 40s screwball comedies where it's like they hate, His Girl Friday, stuff like that, bringing up baby. They hate each other, not hate each other, but there's a tension between them. And then obviously went to, Jane Austen, Darcy and Elizabeth Bennet. And then I was like, does it go back even further? You think about Shakespeare. Can't think of the one I was thinking of. Much Ado About Nothing. That's the one. So is this just a very, why is this trope so successful?
I think conflict is successful in books, in any book, and conflict between your two main characters. And I don't want to make it seem like this isn't something that it's a cop-out or anything, but it is, for me, that enemies to lovers is easier to write. My most recent romance was Friends to Lovers, which I found very challenging. Meanwhile, my other ones before that, I always have that enemies kind of feeling at the beginning. And it is easier because that conflict is right there on the page. The chemistry is almost the same, romantic chemistry and hating each other chemistry, right? So if you find that thing that makes them diametrically opposed to each other, that miscommunication or misunderstanding of who they really are, where they're seeing just the surface of a person, if you find that at the beginning, then it does make it easier to create that conflict. And we're always rooting for those two people that are conflict from each other, that have that conflict from each other to eventually get over it and find each other. So I think that could be why it's so popular. So many people are writing it, but readers love reading it too. Yeah. You guys are all nodding. Yeah. Yeah. Like it's really, really fun to read the conflict.
Yeah. That was a good answer. Can we talk about food for a second? Because at first you might not think culture and chemistry and romance books, but food is it factors so large into many of the books up here and in many romance novels. Why do you think that is?
I think Jackie should first.
This is a Jackie question.
If you think about sort of the typical first date is sort of like you go out for dinner and see a movie or something like that. So it often, or these ideas we have of first dates involve food to start with. But in general, I don't know, for me, food just sort of naturally appears in my writing, and I didn't really think about it at first, and then it was pointed out to me, and it became more conscious over time. I guess just, it's partly just that food's something that brings people together, and yeah, I don't know.
What about the chemistry aspect of food? People almost wooing the other person with food.
I think food should be a love language. I think that, and at least in Sorry Not Sorry, part of Sammy and Manny falling in love was her discovery of the Indian culture through food. And I've dated men who did not eat cheese or, did not eat a certain type of food, and we broke up over that type of situation. So this is a dear breakup story. I think that food is literally a love language. It can make or break a relationship.
I agree completely. I actually did break up with a boyfriend because he didn't eat well.
He just didn't eat, period.
Yeah, he didn't. And I think it's such a big part of our lives. Like I know that I'm a huge foodie and I love food, and food is such a big part of my life. I can't imagine being in a relationship with someone who didn't share that with me, because like I just can't even wrap my head around, like, what would I eat? Where would we go? What kind of restaurant? If he's going to be picky, it doesn't work for me. And like Jackie, I think I'm the same, that I didn't intentionally intend to write about food, but I just kind of did because it's a big part of my own life. And there's also the cultural aspect, like Sonya was saying, that if you're writing from a specific culture, food is a great way to introduce people to that culture and to make readers feel grounded in the culture. Because I can't imagine writing Indian culture without having Indian food in that.
Are we able to talk a little bit about heat levels in the books? Because there's a variety of them. In some of the books, the heat levels are dialed up very, very high in terms of what, sex scenes. And then in other books, it's dialed back a bit. And I think it's sort of takes place behind closed doors. So is this just a personal choice? Is it something you're thinking about for your intended audience? How do you make that decision?
Mine came deeply from not wanting my mom to read a sex scene I had written. I felt that extremely strongly in every cell of my body. So mine are closed door. I mean, they'll kiss and that's it. Like, they'll have sex, but there's no way. Oh, God, even thinking of it right now is horrifying to me. So mine was a personal choice based on that.
I guess it depends on, I don't know, like we say in Punjabi, like the mirch level, you know, the hot level, the chili level. And really, like when I go back to my book, there is a scene between Sammy and Manny where Manny is caught in her Indian sari and Manny has to save her. So there's a little bit of like sexy friction that goes on in that situation. And I don't think it has to be like Bridgerton level or, you know, 50 Shades of Grey level, but it can still get you goosebumpy and you want it. So that's the style that I like to write. Although I think for my second book, I will definitely have a lot more sex. Like, can I say that word right now? I
think we can. There's books in this building that have that word in it.
Right? SEX. Oh my gosh. It's like the first time I ever said bra. I said arb because I was so afraid for my mom to hear that word. But anyways, it just is like sex sells sometimes too. And when you think it's appropriate in that scene, I don't see why you need to hold back. I mean, I've done way worse things on social media, so I'm not worried about my parents reading my book that way.
So I told my dad he could read Donut Fall in Love as long as he never ever tried to talk to me about it. So I think he has read it, but I'm not actually sure. There are a few sex scenes in that book, and I've always written open door sex scenes in my books. I think it's partly because I started writing romance in the wake of 50 Shades of Grey, and at the time, their erotic romance and hotter heat levels were quite popular, and that's sort of just where I started. And like sometimes a sex scene can be, it's just more, you know, show they have great chemistry, but sometimes there really is a lot of opportunity for character growth, to show vulnerability. So they can be really useful in sort of moving the romance forward.
I agree with Jackie completely. I tend to write closed door, but it's not for it. Unlike Lily, it wasn't a conscious choice. That's just what felt right for the book. My next couple of adult books will be open door. So, and it really does feel like this scene would not work if I didn't if I didn't open the door and let people see the intimacy that's happening, because the intimacy in that particular relationship at that point of time is important for the progression. So I'm not all on the same page, like it's just kind of all over the place, and I know that kind of makes readers like, why doesn't she just pick one? I just kind of do my own thing. But it is, there's a lot to be said about the chemistry that you can build up. Like Sonya said, the chemistry you can build up without showing on the page sex as well. Your example of the sari is great. Mine of the forearms, like she's looking at his forearms a lot, like a lot. And that's very sexy. So building up that chemistry is so super important. And I think writing closed door romance forces you to do that much more so than if you were writing explicit only. So building up that skill of writing that chemistry without having on the page sex was super, super great for me and really important. And I'm glad I did it. But it's not always going to be the same way.
Knowing that I was lucky enough to be here with you guys, I sort of wanted to research a little bit the history of this genre and in the modern day, and found out there's a great piece in the Washington Post that was almost like oral history with some of the writers who started it and really boosted it in the 70s, and how happy they were that, you know, obviously they were able to write stories where essentially women didn't die at the end because that was sort of the norm. They were women writing stories about women for women, and the women survived. And through that, though, as we know, if we've read a number of them, the genre has become very, very structured. Like there are words, like you just used it, closed door. Like that's a thing, right? And I learned this. Just wait. HEA, that's short form for happily ever after. There are certain things that these books have to check in terms of structure. But from the sounds of it, like there's still freedom to move within that structure. But does the structure ever, is it a curse or is it a blessing or is it sometimes both?
I think any genre, any literary genre has structure. If you read a mystery and you don't find out who the murderer is again, you will rage. Like, that's just how it is, right?
Yeah.
I find that in romance, because it is predominantly women, we get a lot more criticism about working within our structure and working within the parameters of it has to be about the couple, or the love story. I don't want to limit it to couple. And they have to end up either happily ever after, or HFA, happily for now, or HFN, happily for now. But there has to be a happy resolution for those people in love at the end. But within that, like, that's two things. Like, there's a huge amount of space to play in within those two things, the same way that, you have to have a certain degree of world building in science fiction, or you have to have, in a thriller, there has to be like a time or some sort of something to thrill against. But there's still a lot that you can do within that.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think, I guess I'm like the newer kid on the block because I'm the debut. And so I didn't really follow the structure. And a lot of readers notice that. And that's when you go into that deep hole of an author reading your reviews, which you should never do. And you do. and readers pick up on that because they're so used to a certain type of structure and tropes and the happily ever afters. As a debut, I didn't go through that process of trying to figure out that structure needed to be in my book because I wasn't necessarily trying to sell a book that was structured that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, I guess it just depends on who you're writing for, if you're writing for somebody, and the relationship you have with your editor as well, too.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of who you're writing for, because I know some of your books are international now. So do the books change a lot from audience to audience, like from Canada / North America to overseas?
Well, Sorry Not Sorry is called The Breakup Expert in the UK. And it's because in the UK, the way that Indians say the word sorry is not like sorry, as we say sorry, as in sorry. So they needed to change it to The Breakup Expert, else it wouldn't make any sense over there.
Oh.
But it's the exact same book.
That's super interesting. I was surprised. I actually just came back from the UK, and my books in the UK with my UK publisher are exactly the same. The cover,
Really?
My Accidentally Engaged has a bit of a different cover, but Camila Knows Best is exactly the same. I thought I would get my U's back because I have an American publisher, so they took all my U's out of the word color and all that. So I thought in the UK I would get my U's back, but no. I think because it's an American published book.
Okay, so they've just come to expect that.
Yeah, I guess. My German book is funny. My book's been translated into German, and the title for Accidentally Engaged. So in Canada and in North America and the UK, it's Accidentally Engaged. In German, I cannot pronounce it, but it translates to A Pinch of Salt for Love.
Oh my gosh, isn't that interesting?
So cute.
Cover. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add to that. And speaking of covers, here in North America, Manny's wearing a sari on the cover of Sorry Not Sorry. And in the UK, Sammy is wearing the kurta and she's in a dress.
Ooh.
So I thought that was interesting too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One little anecdote, when I was reading that thing in the Washington Post, they had Fabio, a few lines from Fabio. Do you remember he was on the cover of all of those?
We do, yes.
I was once Fabio for Halloween.
No. Oh, sorry.
I looked amazing.
Of course you did.
I got a wig. I was at Value Village. I got a wig. They had a fake chest. And I stuffed pillows down a big shirt for my muscles. And I found like a fake sword. It was great. It was the best Halloween costume ever.
He had no idea he was getting paid to do these photo shoots, and he would show up, no idea what they were for, and he just got to pose with beautiful women, and then he would go home, and then one day he was in Florida, and a bunch of women just went bananas when they saw him and asked to have photos taken with him. One of them ran home because there was a language barrier and brought the book, and he was like, wow, that's me on the cover. He was just thrilled by it. There's no question there. I just wanted to tell that. Really? Hey, Fabio, wait a second. Do men read your books? Do you ever hear from them?
I do,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Yes.
Definitely.
Talk to me about
Exes
this.
have read my book.
Hoping to, do you think they read them hoping to find
I think
information about maybe a breakup?
maybe, but also a lot of people that like individuals that I haven't spoken to that I have had relationships with read the book and reached out. Others blocked me on various platforms, but no, I think that generally speaking, men who reached out they actually said it was funny. They literally LOL'd. So it's nice to get that. Yeah.
I think a lot more men read romance than I thought going into this. I remember with my first book, The Chai Factor, it was a romance, but it wasn't a romance publisher, and it wasn't marketed as a romance. It was marketed as general fiction. So a lot of people didn't realize going in it was a romance. It followed the tropes. It followed the structure of a romance. But I remember I went to a book club, and it was a book club. It was like a corporate. It was a corporate office. It was very cute that they had this. One of the staff members had created this little book club for the staff of this bank. And so they all came in, and she would grab everybody in her own team. So it was all marketers in this. So it's like a bank marketing department reading my book, which was very funny. So about half of them were men, because she just grabbed everyone on her team and forced them to read the book. And I was laughing so much when I came out of it because the men loved the book. They absolutely loved it. And they had no clue they were reading a romance. They hadn't the foggiest idea. Afterwards, like when they were talking to me, and I would mention romance, and they're like, "Well, this isn't a romance." I'm like, "Yeah, this is a romance." And they're like, "This doesn't feel like a romance. Have you read a romance until today?"
Do they know what romance is?
I don't know what they were expecting. I think they thought it was going to be more explicit, and it's closed door for sex. And I don't know what else they thought. They thought like the Fabio cover with the. So they really didn't know. So I feel like I kind of like pulled a fast one on them and made them read a romance that they didn't expect. But since then, I've had a ton of male readers, like a ton of readers that come to me and are openly knowing that they are reading romance. They are aware of what they're doing, and they're loving it. And I think it's great.
Has anyone else had an ex sort of reach out or been blocked or?
So this isn't my real name, so
Smart.
it's not really a secret because I use my face. But I haven't posted about my writing on like my real name, Facebook, and social media. So I don't know if any of my exes actually know.
Oh, and that's
Surprise, they're here.
So I don't know.
wow. That was intentional, just to have to
Well,
not deal with that
I
drama.
mean, that wasn't the only name. That wasn't the main reason I used a pen name. But I'm like, whatever. It's not really a big deal to me either way. If they want to read it, then that's fine. But
It's just another sale, really, at the end of the day.
As long as they buy the book.
That's a really good way of looking at it. Now, romance writers, they're engineers, they're aerospace planners, they're scientists, they're brain doctors, and they come from these varied backgrounds and end up in this genre being happier than they were in their former fields. Do you feel comfortable telling us, like, if you did have, like, what was your day job 10 years ago, or what field did you come from? Jackie, do you want to start down there at the end?
I have an engineering degree, and I worked as a geophysicist.
Incredible.
But I stopped doing that before I was published. So yeah, I basically forget everything I learned in school.
Was there? I'm going to get back to everyone answering that question. But was there a moment where either you read a book and said, "That's what I'm going to do," or any kind of epiphany?
Oh, so I always wanted to be a writer. So that wasn't, the engineer was sort of the practical, suited to my talents job, I guess. I didn't really like it, but it was I was okay at it. So I think the book for me that was sort of like, that's what I'm going to write, was actually Bridget Jones' Diary. That was, I mean, I didn't read it till maybe 2008 or 9, I guess. And that was, I started writing in 2010. So yeah, it was something I always wanted to do, although I didn't really think about it being romance until around that time. But.
You're right. Lily, what about you?
I actually have a master's degree in archaeology, which I use zero, except to trot out at parties if I want to look impressive. But I work as a communications manager, so I'm on a year's book leave right now. But that's my full-time job.
And was there a book for you that said, "Ding dong, that's what I'm going to do"?
I don't think so. I'd always been a reader, but it never actually occurred to me I could write books until I was in my 20s because it just didn't seem like something
Yeah.
people did. Like, I don't know where I thought books came from, like the store, I don't know. But it just seemed like something that some other people could do, but just wasn't something I could even consider doing. And then I just realized one day, it was at Word on the Street. You guys go to Word on the Street? Yeah, I was walking around and looking, and I was like, neat book ideas. Like, oh my God, I can write that book. Like, and it literally occurred to me. This was when I was back like around Queen's Park, and I just thought I could write that book. And I went home and I started writing a really bad book in my 20s.
And Farah, what about you?
So I'm on my third career. I started out in luxury fashion in human resources. And then I went back to school, got my master's in psychology, and I was a psychotherapist and a youth counselor. And now I'm a writer.
And was there a book for you?
I also, even later than Lily, I didn't really start writing until, I know I started writing in 2016. So I remember the day, it was January 2016. And I just started like enough thinking for my entire life about how I wanted to write. It's time to actually try. And then I sold my first book a year later. So it was a good time to start. So it wasn't a particular book. It was in 2015, I read about 150 romances that year. That's when I discovered Goodreads and I could track my reading. So I tracked it. It was 150 books that year of romances. And again, all my life I thought, one day I'm going to write, one day I'm going to write, one day I'm going to write. But I never did. I never even tried it. I was 35, 37, somewhere around there. So I was quite old comparatively. And so I just decided to start, and I did. But I don't think it was one particular book. Also, Bridget Jones' Diary I loved. Marian Key's books really kind of grabbed me. I love the idea of writing something like that way Marian Key's can write. A rom-com with a very serious story behind it, like a very heart-wrenching, dramatic story, but it's still a rom-com. So that was kind of what drew me into it.
Sonya?
So I have a degree in journalism, psychology, and criminology. And I was a journalist back in the day, and I was a weather anchor for a while. Then I switched into comms, and so my book I wrote a year ago, a year and a half ago. I wrote it in March, sold it in August, and that typically does not happen. However, I just would not give up. And so I think for me, it wasn't about reading something that inspired me to write. I was in a terrible relationship that wasn't going anywhere. And so I think I got to this point, and I've said this many times, even on the social, where I remember putting together a PowerPoint presentation to this guy as to why we should be together. And it literally got to like pros and cons of, on the pros list, it was, we have cute dimples, we'll have beautiful babies together. Like, it was just so pathetic. And I realized that all this energy that I was putting towards these emails and these texts should go towards writing something else, which is a book. And I couldn't find, at the time, like South Asian women characters who were in non-traditional roles, whether it was through binging Netflix or the books I was reading. So I created a woman who is the owner of a breakup agency and was openly talking about relationships and dating and breaking up. And I think that's what instigated, at least for me, to write something that I wasn't necessarily reading or seeing.
Well, Vox recently described romance novels as cultural artifacts, sort of documenting what people yearn and burn for, which I really like that, actually. And I think now more than ever, they document what people from various cultures yearn and burn for. I'm wondering if there is any sort of anxiety or pressure to portray your respective cultures, like to portray the love as, look, it's universal. Love and desire and attraction are universal, or is there sort of this push or pull to show, look how love exists and chemistry exists via my culture? Or is it like a melding of the two?
I think I will just tell you that I've watched enough Bollywood movies in my life to know that the guy looks at the woman and he's married to her the next day. And that's what I brought into my book. And I think that I was trying to almost give that lesson of love from my point of view as a South Asian woman who grew up in a situation where it wasn't necessarily looked upon in a great way for me to talk about dating men and dating, period. We didn't, I'm one of 3 daughters. I had a very strict dad and mom. And again, from my point of view in our culture, that's not something that we openly talked about. Things have changed for some people. And in my immediate family, that has not changed, unfortunately. And so I think that I purposefully took my book as a way to teach people about how there are lessons in the Indian culture, again, from my point of view, where you can't necessarily always openly talk about dating, sex, and intimacy.
That's an interesting answer. I think similar to you, I grew up very traditional and it wasn't something we talked about a lot. But when I came to start writing, I don't know how much I wanted to put that experience on the page. I was not trying to teach anybody anything. I wasn't trying to represent my culture. In some ways, it's a little bit easier to write from my own culture than to write from somebody else's. And I guess I kind of wanted other people to see themselves if they could, but it is such a burden to it is such a burden. Yeah, it's such a burden to have to expect people to learn about what it's like to be a South Asian Muslim woman living in Toronto. To expect that people will read my book and understand what that's like, because that's not true. I'm only writing my own identity. I'm only writing my own experience. Even just South Asian people, like me and Sonya, are quite different, and our books would be quite different because we're coming from different cultures. Although on the surface we may look the same, and we might both wear saris to weddings and such, but quite different. And one of the things I absolutely love about having an opportunity to write now is there's so much variety in Asian representation in books, not just in South Asian, but in all Asian representation. There are so many romance. I mean, Jackie can talk about this project she's been doing for the last month, but there's so many Asian romance writers out there, and they're all writing from their own experiences, and their own experiences are very different from each other. Even just South Asians, there's so many South Asian romance writers. I have a friend group of 10 of us that we talk almost daily, and we're all South Asian, traditionally published romance writers. And we're so different. We're writing from different communities, different cultures, different languages, but all South Asian. And I love that we can do that.
That was very nicely said. And you also tossed up a beautiful ball to Jackie. Jackie, what the heck's going on?
So I guess May was, I think it's called something slightly different in the US, Canada, but it was Asian Heritage Month. And so I had this page on my website where I had a list of 60-something Asian romances for under $5. Just ones that I had people submit on a Google form, and then also just ones I found. At that price point, they're mainly self-published books or small press books. But I still managed to find more than 60 without a problem. So yeah, there's lots out there, and I think just the different publishing opportunities these days that exist with self-publishing and such makes it easier to hear a variety of voices if you look for them. So.
Bravo, that's remarkable. Listen, 2 quick questions left. I want to ask you about the community between you guys, just in Toronto, because I was reading the acknowledgments in your books, and there's so many times where many of you are mentioned in the other person's books. You're rather new on the scene, so I want to hear about. It seems like it may be more special on other genres of writers. Like there seems to be a great deal of support and community. Is that accurate, or?
I think like any group, you find the people you connect with. So for here in Toronto, there's actually a group called the Toronto Romance Writers, where a lot of us kind of met.
Yeah, that's really where the 3 of us met.
Yeah, so it's a group of like-minded people where you can go in and talk about craft, and you can they had manuscript critiques, and just book recommendations and just a huge amount of support. So every meeting, when I was going, every meeting started with, so there's, okay, the best part, a thing of chocolates. And it was like, who has good news? Who got an agent? Who won an award? Who finished a book, finished a chapter, sold a book? And then it was, who got rejected? Who didn't finish that chapter? And we applauded for everything because everyone was trying. So it was a really supportive group, because when you're writing, it can be really isolated, because in the end, it's you in that screen or that page, and that's it, right? So you need other people around you where you can be like, I'm not sure about this. Like, does this track for you? Like, I know I've gone to Jackie a few times and just being like, I don't know, man. Like, is this too much? And I've gone to Farah and be like, can you read this? Because I don't think I'm hitting the mark. And I can trust that I'm going to get not feedback that saves my ego, but feedback that makes the book much better. Which is really what you want for a writer. Like, you can go to your friends and family, and they're gonna be like, that was great, you're amazing, this is amazing, this is like up there with Shakespeare, and you're like, thank you, it's awesome. But deep down, it's probably not quite Shakespeare level. And you really need the people to know people who will be like, yeah, you know what, that actually isn't working. Here's some ideas, like, let's brainstorm some ideas on how it could possibly work. So you kind of build community slowly over time as you connect with people. And I know some people have reached out to me, like, they've read my book and they've been like, hey, can I just talk to you about it? And which I love. Like, I love that people can just email me or DM me or something and just be like, what was it like to write that bit? Or can I just chat? Which I'm always happy to do, because I think we all do need to encourage each other, because it can be really lonely and kind of depressing sometimes. That's lovely.
The community in Toronto is fantastic. I've been a member of Toronto Romance Writers since that first day that I told you I started in 2016. The first thing I did was join them. And I've been a member since then, and it's had its ups and downs and whatever, and there's good people and bad people in every community. But it's just so great to have that community, to have that kind of encouragement. And then the wider community, romance writers, I believe, are the most supportive of each other authors. Not all, and I'm not going to say that that's for every romance author, but in my experience, in my own communities, whether it's my Toronto community or my South Asian romance writer friends, or my friends that are the same publisher as me, or my friends that have the same agent as me, each community is so supportive that I've found that I can count on people in all of these different areas. And I have all of my little communities, and I absolutely love it. And like I said, I've had a lot of jobs, but nothing has been quite like this for people being there for each other.
That's beautiful. Okay, quickly, before we all met in person, I asked if in an email if there was anything specific that everyone wanted to talk about, and I won't name names, but here was one request. Someone up here wanted to know, does anyone else have a file of hot person / hot moment screenshots and videos saved for research purposes, like hypothetically Yoongi from BTS walking through the airport, running his hand through his new long fluffy hair? Or is that just me? Ladies, tell me what's in your files.
Look, I'm not ashamed. That was me. That was totally me. Yoongi is my bias. If you want to talk BTS, I'm going to be here. I will talk several hours. And I do have all those files.
Any other mental files that anyone wants to share?
Basically, no to that question, but because I self-published some of my books, I have the covers made, and I am sort of in charge of figuring out what goes on those covers. So I'm sometimes like obsessively looking at stock photo sites, and I have like all these big collections of like couples, men, women. Like some of them are earmarked for specific series, but I also just have like, collections of like 100 pictures of just men to look for future books.
Just men.
So you should follow Jackie on Twitter, because sometimes she posts those pictures as she comes across them.
Oh my gosh, does she
So
really?
I like one book I wrote was because I specifically wanted to use a series of pictures of a guy with a durian. Yeah.
Oh my God. Quickly, I need to share one with you that my partner sent to me. It's a woman in a beautiful business suit, and she's lying with her laptop on top of F. Scott Fitzgerald's grave. It was the weirdest photo I have ever seen. Jackie, new challenge. Make that into. Anyone else? Mental file.
I'm not a very visual person, so I don't usually figure out what my characters look like before I start writing.
Mhm.
But I do save lines. Sometimes I will overhear something or think of a line, and I will quickly jot it down on my phone. And usually it's by project, like I'll have a file for each project. But sometimes I just come up with an idea and then I work a project for it. So that's more, and then the visual has to come eventually because my publisher will say, "What do your characters look like?" And because they're making a cover and we need to know what they look like. I'm like, so then I figure it out. But usually I just have like funny lines, jokes, or little observations.
Love it. Sonya?
I do have a Riz Ahmed folder, and yes, it was for research purposes because obviously I needed to one day cast Sammy, and I needed to have a folder that was specifically for Riz. But I have the biggest crush on him, and also he married a debut author, so there's still a chance for me.
That was quite the story when they
And
met
it was
in
such
a
a meet
in a,
cute.
in a
It was
cafe.
the perfect meet cute.
She was an
Yes.
author, and he came. He came.
So
upon
they were
her
in
a
this like
cafe.
New York coffee shop, and they both went to go plug their laptops into an outlet, and that's how they bumped into each other.
Get out of town. That's
Great
incredible.
PR.
This has never happened to me. I'm also an author, and this has never happened to me.